All right. Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Gnostic Studies. And we are going to continue our Gnostic Runology series. Today, we're going to cover the second half of what we were looking at last class. The Gebo rune, the cross. Today we're going to look at the legend, the Lord Quetzalcoatl, with a Gnostic explanation. This is from the book Secret Doctrine of Anahuac, published in 1974. But before we do that, we like to do a review of the previous class, which luckily is on the same thing here, same page for us. So this is part of our review of the Gebo rune, which has been drawn like this, as well as these shapes you can see below. We looked at what Samael Aun Weor said in Igneous Rose, how he talked about this rune, the Kaum or Kaun rune, which when we place two of them on top of each other, they become an X shape, and how this is related with White Tantra, transmutation, and that we have to learn how to manage the feminine principle of the sun, he talks about, which is symbolized by a woman's head on a eagle body, which we find a lot in Germany. But this same X shape could also be two R runes placed on top of each other in the same way, remembering that the R, the A or R rune corresponds to the Ara, which means altar, or altar stone, specifically the sacred stone, Peter. And in two books, one called, or actually it's the same book, The Solar Bodies, sometimes given the translation of Gnostic Wisdom, chapter 19, it talked about the swastika, which is apparently, according to the Germans, the shape that is concealed within this. If you put two of them on top of each other, then you can get a hook cross, which is a shape that is universal. You find it just about everywhere in the Americas, in Africa, in Asia, in the Middle East, in Europe, and doesn't belong to any one group. So he says that the swastika is an alchemical sign with different clues, or keys, and that heaven is something that is taken by force or by violence. And in this case, the term violence means strong actions, we could say, against the ego, or against defects, against our enemies, which we find within. In the New Testament, chapter 11 of the book of Matthew, it says, "And from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force." This is implying that we need to do something different. We could say revolutionary, rebelliousness, compared to society, culture, in order to take back that divine culture, that conscious culture that we need to connect ourselves with if we want to understand how to make some progress, take advantage of this lifetime. The Ara, the R rune, which we could say is one half of this X shape, is related to different types of altars. the altar of poverty of the beginner, altar of the supreme art of alchemy, the companion, the second degree of masonry in Latin languages is called companion. In English, it's often called fellowcraft. But fellow or companion have the same idea behind them. And the third altar is the altar of death, upon which the resurrected master has triumphed. The Sahaja Maithuna is the science of Peter. Remember, Peter means the rock, the one who is the foundation of the church, the living stone. Patar. The T reminds us of the cross. The R of the sacred fire, Ra. And the P of the parents of humanity. So obviously we're talking about white tantra here. In the Mayan Mysteries, a book published in 1977, the same author talks of this X cross, the cross of St. Andrew. He says, "We know very well what this cross means. It indicates the complete work in the great work, and is related not only to the creation of the superior existential bodies of the being, the solar bodies, but also to the elimination of the ego and sacrifice for humanity." We see the X cross or cross of St. Andrew. It is as if saying, cross the mercury and the sulfur, right? Mercury is a liquid, we could say symbolic of the yin, and sulfur is a powder that burns, turns into a blue or green flame. When you light it, it can be used to clean an environment. It's related with the fire. So we've got the yin and the yang symbolism. So this X cross is as if saying, cross the mercury and the sulfur so that the solar human can be born within you. The cross of St. Andrew explains the work to be performed in the ninth sphere with the sulfur and the mercury. The difficult struggle in order to attain the elimination of the psychological aggregates, the egos, based on conscious works and voluntary suffering. The extraordinary torture of Andrew, filled with enigmas and portents, made the X cross, upon which his separated limbs were tightened in a pitiless way, very famous. The deep significance of the tortures of Andrew on the terrible X is the annihilation of the beloved ego in the laboratorium oratorium of the third logos. The shape of an X is profoundly significant in alchemy. Crossing the mercury with the sulfur in order to perform the great work was known in the ancient Aztec as well as Mayan mysteries. And that's what we're going to look at today. So, in chapter 9 of this book, Secret Doctrine of Anahuac, he talks about Andrew and the symbolism of the X and the fraternities that of Scotland that use this X symbol. This is their flag, the Scottish flag, and this thorn of St. Andrew, the thistle, as symbols of their esoteric fraternity. Sometimes they used a fish also, but we could see that the fish is, if you've seen it before, made by making an X. That it's also concealed here in this symbol of the lamb holding the cross. And that the words of the Emperor Constantine, who saw in a vision a cross, was actually an X cross with a P, which are the first two letters of the word Christos or Christ in Latin. Of course, when we think of the cross, we think of Inri, which has many different interpretations. But it was the words that were written on top of the cross that the one we call Jesus was crucified on. So all of this brings us to alchemy. And alchemy is related with some colors, a symbolic way of talking about a change, a transformation that actually is a real transformation, but that for many generations couldn't be talked about publicly due to the degeneration. And now we can talk about it publicly, at least for the moment. We'll see what happens in the future. But the colors are black, white, and red. However, red can also be symbolized by purple and gold for various reasons. But the idea is the transmutation of the creative energy through the bipolarization between man and woman. And of course, these mysteries were known throughout the world, including in China, in the East, where they have the black and white symbol here shown, which we call the symbol of yin and yang in the West. Creative energy is certainly a tremendous, highly explosive, and marvelous power. Whosoever learns to use the erotic weapon, the spear or lance of all magical pacts, will be able to reduce the ego, the psychological I, to cosmic dust. It goes without saying that the lance, as an occultist emblem of sexual virile power, plays a great role in numerous Oriental legends, being the instrument of salvation or liberation. When wisely handled by the Gnostic, it enables us to reduce the multiple undesirable elements to ashes, which make up the ego, the myself, the oneself. Piercing the dragon, Saint Michael or Saint George using a lance, Cadmus, Perseus, or Jason in so-called pagan legends. St. Andrew's Cross and the Holy Spirit fully allegorize the Buddhist annihilation. When, with profound veneration, we cite Andrew's Cross and the Holy Pike, we must never forget the Holy Grail. Sacred vessels of all religions represent the feminine creative organs, feminine organs of generation, and also regeneration. And they correspond to Plato's cosmogonic vase, Hermes and Solomon's cup, the blessed urn of the ancient mysteries, etc. The mother of our own flesh, or the woman serpent, is celebrated in the Mexican traditions, which represent her fallen from her primeval state of joy and innocence. And he cites Zoroastrian, Hindu traditions as well. The atonements performed in different cultures in order to purify the baby at its entrance into life, right, which we call baptism, are indeed symbolic of a pact of sexual magic. That is white tantra transmutation. In Yucatan, Mexico, the newborn child was taken to the temple where the priest sprinkled baptismal water upon their head and gave them a name. In the Canary Islands, it was women who performed this function instead of men. Adam and Eve always appear separated by the trunk of a tree of paradise. In many cases, the serpent is coiled around and may even be represented with a human head. Only by fulfilling the pact of the sacrament of baptism can the original sin be annihilated so that we may return to paradise. Jachin and Boaz, Urim and Thummim, Apollo and Diana are certainly the two main columns of the Temple of Wisdom. In the middle of the two columns of the temple, the Arcanum AZF is found, the key of the great work. The stone, the rock, the aura, Peter. Comprehending and eliminating, here is the key of the cross of St. Andrew. This is how we go about dying from instant to instant. It is not possible to radically eliminate all psychological defects without having fully comprehended them first in all the levels of the mind. During chemical coitus, Devi Kundalini, our particular individual cosmic mother, can and must wield the holy pike, Minerva's spear, Achilles' lance, Longinus's weapon, in order to destroy the psychological defect that we have totally comprehended. Ask and it shall be given, knock and it shall be opened. All right, so that's our review. This brings us to part 2, where he gives in the same chapter the legend of Quetzalcoatl, which is very interesting, both for a Gnostic and for a person who likes studying comparative religion, and in the context of this X cross, which is the name of the chapter where he talks about it. So we wanted to dedicate a little bit of time to this, but if you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them. But there's none right now, so we're just going to jump right into the legend. The first section, Alchemy and Our Hidden Inheritance. The centuries-old legend says that Lord Quetzalcoatl, on the eve of his fall, said, "They say I will have to leave my rich feathered houses, and my houses decorated with snails." Full of joy, he then ordered the queen to come to the beautiful mat. "Go and bring with you Queen Quetzalcoatl, the Eve of Hebrew mythology, she who is the delight of my life, so that together we drink and drink until intoxication." The valets went to Tlamachuanyan's palace, and from there they brought the queen. "Our queen, our child, King Quetzalcoatl, ordered us to take you with him. He wants to share joy with you." She answered them, "I will go." When Quetzalcoatl arrived, she sat beside the king. They filled her cup with liquor 4 times, and the 5th was in honor of her greatness. And when she was intoxicated, the magicians began singing. The king Quetzalcoatl got up and staggered, said to the princess in the middle of the songs, "My wife, let us enjoy and drink this liquor." He was referring to the liquor of lust. Since they were intoxicated, they spoke without reason. The lustful do not understand reasoning. The king did no more penance, nor went he to the ritual bath, neither did he pray in the temple. Finally, they fell asleep. And the next day, upon awakening, both were sad, their hearts were broken. In Hebrew mythology, it is said that Adam and Eve were also sad after eating the forbidden fruit. And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. Quetzalcoatl then said, "I got drunk. I have transgressed. Nothing will remove the stain I have put on myself." Then with his guards, he started singing a song. The crowd waiting outside was made to wait longer. Mortified, tearful, full of sorrow and grieving, seeing that everyone knew of his evil deeds, and having no one to console him, he started crying before his God. This is textual from the Nahuatl epic and invites us to meditate. The following verses of the Hebrew Bible can be easily compared to the citation above. Therefore the Lord God Jehovah Elohim sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubim, and a flaming sword which turned every way, to keep the way of the tree of life. From chapter 3 of Genesis. Quetzalcoatl's flight and his mysterious departure from paradisiacal Tula are certainly extraordinary and unusual. It is said that he then buried in his houses of gold, silver, and red shells, and all the lovely things which belong to the Toltec arts. Marvelous works of art, precious and beautiful works of art, were all buried. He hid everything in secret places, in the mountains and in the ravines. Very rich, inexhaustible treasure that later had probably had to be sought and found, esoteric wealth that had been previously hidden in the bowels of the earth. When translated into Gnostic or alchemical terms, these mystical paragraphs of Anahuac are superb. The metallic decrease of the spiritual gold is the inevitable consequence or result of any sexual fall. When alluding to the marvelous works of art and precious and beautiful works of art, we can study between the lines the great universal epistle of James, the blessed patron of the great work. Enoch found the hidden and imperishable treasure in the living bowels of the mountains of Mount Moriah. We all have to look for our hidden inheritance. The treasure is never found on the surface of earth. It is necessary to descend into the Avernus in order to find it. Then he references this Latin phrase, which is visita interiora terra rectificator invenis occultum lapidum, which means visit the interior of the earth, and by rectifying it you will find the stone. Right? The ara. Peter. Undoubtedly the philosophical stone with all the precious gems of the celestial Jerusalem, which symbolize cosmic and transcendental virtues and powers, are Quetzalcoatl's treasure, our particular intimate wealth, and we hid it when we left Eden. We must seek for it within our very own selves, here and now. Before the tree of old age, the Lord Quetzalcoatl saw his face, and in infinite pain he said, "I am old." He arrived at another place and he rested. He sat on a stone, and there he placed his hands. He then looked at Tula and began to cry. He cried in great sobs. Drops of water ran from his eyes, forming a double stream of tears. His falling teardrops pierced the rock. As he leaned on his hands against the rock, the tears were imprinted on it, as if the rock were made of mud. His hands as well as his buttocks were thus engraved on the rock. A clear imprint remained in the place where he sat. The imprint of his hands can be seen in the place called Temacpalco. In stricto sensu, sexual electricity lies buried in the rock, in the stone, in sex. It can either liberate or enslave the human being. These paragraphs invite us to reflection. The Waters of Alchemy. Quetzalcoatl's phenomenon is always wondrous to ponder and has tremendous validity. Certainly these are not mere semantic clarifications. We only want to comment on the Quetzalcoatlian message by means of phenomenology. It is said that the Blessed One, after having suffered so much, arrived at a place called the Stone Bridge. In this place there is water, diet seminis, water that springs and rises, water that expands and diffuses. Modern anthropologists have mistakenly interpreted this as in a totally different and odd way. They know nothing about the esotericism of Anahuac. They do not know the religious meaning of these songs. Although this may seem very far from Gnosticism, deep down it is not, and we must emphasize the following. The Blessed One returned to the path that he had previously abandoned. It is said that he broke off a rock, he made a bridge and crossed over to the other side. In this way, the great avatar of the Aztecs returned to his path and reached a place called Serpent's Water. Arab authors call this source Holmat, and also teach us that its waters gave immortality to the prophet Elijah. They place the famous source of the Modhalan, a term whose root means obscure and dark sea, indicating with this the metallic chaos, the sacred seed, or materia prima of the great work. This knowledge escapes the rationalist's normal analysis. It is a matter of supra-rational type, a super-rational type of teaching, that can only be apprehended or grasped with the help of a guru. The term servus servus fugitivus, Latin meaning fleeing slave or fugitive slave, that we are lacking is mineral or metallic water, which is a solid and cutting, and which appears with the aspect of a stone and can be easily liquefied. So what does this mean, this fleeing slave or fugitive slave? It is said, as he mentioned earlier, that the electric force, the creative force, can either liberate or enslave us. So as we're working with it, we can be freeing ourselves. We can be fleeing that slavery, right? That servitude. This coagulated water in the form of a stone mass is the alkest, or universal solvent, the serpent's water, the metallic soul of the sacred seed, the mercury of the secret philosophy. It is the marvelous result of sexual transmutation. The sages were always very reserved with regards to the philosophical mercury, whose successive stages can be directed at will by the intelligent operator. Although the technique demands some time and effort, it is also extremely simple. No professional duties or skill is required, only the knowledge of a curious technique. The secret secretorum is enough. We, the Gnostics, have disclosed it publicly. Connection of the lingam yoni, phallus uterus, without ever spilling the cup of Hermes. Carl Megan said, or Meach says, at the moment of muscular tension, before the currents are inverted, and when the sensation of imminent orgasm appears, the seminal fluid can be stopped by pushing the tongue as far backwards as possible and by stopping the breath, right? Holding the breath. The contraction of the muscles of the anus, as if practicing the exercise of concentration in the Muladhara chakra, is recommended. So this is what we often call in English Kegels or Kegels. You can inhale, hold your breath, and clench the sphincters, blocking the energy. But what is wiser is to not get close, to learn how to tell when your body is getting too close and to stop. Slow down the movement. Alchemy, the mysteries and the mysteries of St. Andrew. The metallic soul of the seed is Hermes, the tinctured mercury, that is raised into mystical gold. In the same way as St. Christopher carries Jesus and the lamb carries its own fleece. This was how, by means of the mercury of the secret philosophy, the blessed Lord Quetzalcoatl regenerated the gold in his soul, in his spirit, and in the superior existential bodies of his being. Without success, the tenebrous ones tried to make the Blessed One return to the sinful path. Right? So this is also what happens to everyone along the path, is that the enemies attack. In no way can I now return, the Lord answers. I must go. Where will you go, Quetzalcoatl? I will go, he says to them, to the red-colored land. I am going to obtain knowledge. They asked him, what will you do there? I am called. The sun calls me, right? The solar teachings. Very well, then leave the Toltec culture. The Blessed One threw his gem necklace into the water, and they sank right there, his material goods, his illusory and worldly possessions. Since then, that place is called Water of Rich Jewels. He travels on and reaches another site, called Place Where One Sleeps, the Orcus of the classics, the Christian limbo, or the sleep dream of the consciousness in this valley of tears. He then meets an adept of the left hand who says to him, where are you going? And the Blessed One answers him, I'm going to the red-colored land. I'm going to get wisdom. Very well, drink this wine to forget. I came to bring it to you. No, I cannot. I cannot taste even a bit. I will force you to drink. If you do not drink, I cannot let you pass, nor can I let you go on your path. I must make you drink, and even get you drunk. Drink then. Then Quetzalcoatl drank wine with a straw, for he was a fallen bodhisattva. So, the first time he fell because he got drunk. The second time he also got drunk, but in this case, because a black magician gave him to drink. Once he had drunk, he tired of the path and fell asleep, snoring for many reincarnations. He passed through unspeakable bitterness, and his snores were heard from afar. Finally, he awakened consciousness again, looked from side to side, looked at himself, and brushed his hair. For this reason, that area is called Place Where One Sleeps. Then he started on his journey once again, and reached the top of the path, which is between the smoking mountain, it symbolizes the lingam, and the white woman, it symbolizes the yoni. There, snow fell upon him and his companions. His fools and simpletons, his psychic aggregates, and inhuman elements, and all of them froze to death. May the flesh come away from the bones, says the old medieval alchemists during chemical coitus. The fraternities of St. Andrew of the Thistle had their esoteric penance. Undoubtedly, the X-cross is the wonderful symbol of the death of all those inhuman elements that, in their entirety, compose the ego, or I. St. Andrew's torment allegorizes frightful tortures in the ninth sphere, the sphere of sex, remorse, and Buddhist annihilation. It is possible to create the gold of the spirit, or to regenerate it, by annihilating those fools, simpletons, or psychological aggregates that personify our defects. The colors of alchemical symbolism. The Blessed One, the Lord Quetzalcoatl, at times cried or sang, and worked with infinite patience in the forge of the Cyclops, sex. He cried for a long time, and profound sighs came from his chest. He stared at the shaded mountain, the mountain of resurrection, and there he went. He performed prodigies everywhere he went, and left amazing signs on his path, as the great Kabir Jesus once did in the Holy Land. When he reached the shore, he made an assemblage of serpents. he had achieved the complete development of the 7 degrees of the fire's power. And once he finished, he sat on it and used it as a boat. Serpents. A boat is like a vehicle or vessel. This reminds us of Gautama Buddha, who sat upon a serpent near the Bodhi tree, the extraordinary fig tree, which is the magnificent symbol of sexual potency. It rained, and the water formed puddles that threatened to drown him, but Gautama, sitting on a serpent, steered the snake as if it were a boat. The similarities that we can pick out in various texts talk to us about the igneous serpent of our magical powers, the feminine aspect of the Hebraic Binah, the wife of Shiva, the third Logos, the Holy Spirit, our particular cosmic mother. Through the elimination of the inhuman elements that we carry within, saves us from the tormenting waters of life. The blessed Lord Quetzalcoatl went further and worked in the waters, the spermatic waters of the first instant, and no one knows how he reached the red-colored land. Unquestionably, the great Kabir Jesus also reached the red-colored land when he was dressed in purple and had a crown of thorns that was put on his head. Then they saluted him, ironically saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they smote him on the head with a reed, and did spit upon him, and bowing their knees worshipped him. Effectively, it is in the sexual or erotic crucible where the materia prima of the great work suffers its own passion, like Christ. It is in the crucible of the ninth sphere where it dies in order to resurrect, to be purified, spiritualized, and afterwards transformed. In Chaldea, the ziggurats, or the 3-story towers, the famous Tower of Babel belongs to this category, were painted with 3 colors, white, black, and purple-red. In order to convey an idea of the far-reaching symbolism of the colors of the great work in Hermetic philosophy, let us note that the Virgin is always depicted dressed in blue, corresponding to black, God in white, and Christ in red. See, he gives a very interesting way of interpreting colors alchemically. In the sacred temples of the pharaohs in the ancient Egypt, when the neophyte was at the point of undergoing the ordeals of initiation, a master would approach him and murmur into his ear a mysterious phrase, "Remember that Osiris is a black god." Clearly, this is the specific color of darkness, of shadows, of the devil, to whom black roses were offered, and also of the primitive chaos, where all the elements and principles of life are mixed and totally confused. This is the symbol of the earth element, of the night, of the radical death of the psychological aggregates which compose the myself. Undoubtedly, just as in the Hebrew Genesis, where day follows night, light succeeds darkness. Blessed are those who have been regenerated and washed by the blood of the Lamb, the sexual fire. They will always wear white clothing. Right? So black is the death of the ego, the elimination, the state we begin in, which is the primitive chaos, or where things are confusing. White is when we become more purified. In the sacred lands of the pharaohs, Ptah, the regenerator, always wore a white linen tunic, thus pointing out the rebirth of the pure ones, those who have died in themselves. In order to apply our viewpoint about the colors of the materia prima of the great work in a systematic way, we must remind our Gnostic students that before he reached the red-colored land, Quetzalcoatl, the Mexican Christ, rightfully wore the yellow tunic. White follows black, yellow follows white, and the purple of the sacred kings of the solar dynasties always follows the yellow color, right? Because royalty, the color is purple, and gold, it belongs to the king or the queen, right? Royalty, so that's yellow. Alchemy and the symbolism of the devil. When the Blessed One arrived at the red-colored land, he put on his shoulders the purple of the divine kings, and resurrected from among the dead. It is said that he looked at himself in the waters as if into a mirror, the mirror of alchemy. His face was beautiful again. He returned to the lost paradise. He then put on the most beautiful clothes, and having lit a fire, he threw himself into it. The sexual fire completely annihilated his psychological eye. Not even the ashes remained. Precious feathered birds, the birds of the spirit, came to see him burning. The red pool, the turquoise-colored bird, the sunflower bird, the blue-red bird, the golden-yellow bird, and the 1,000 other precious birds. When the fire stopped burning, he completed the great work. His heart rose, and he reached heaven. There he became a star, and that star is the star of dawn and of dusk. He had previously descended to the kingdom of the dead, and having been there for 7 days, he became a star. The initiator always hands us the mirror of alchemy with one hand, while he holds Amalthea's horn with the other. To his side we see the tree of life, which the Hebrew Kabbalists study. The mirror always symbolizes the beginning of the great work. The tree of life points out its end. The horn of abundance symbolizes the result. Quetzalcoatl transformed the devil, the brute, material, or crude stone, into Lucifer, the cornerstone of the great work, the archangel of light, or the morning star. The devil, the reflection of our inner logos, was the most sublime creature before we fell into animal generation. This is a French tarot card called the Devil. You see here a pseudo-devil shape. It's actually called Baphomet, Typhon Baphomet. And here we have 2 baby devils chained or enslaved to the rock or the stone. That the devil is a pawn. So I'll read it to you again. The devil, the reflection of our own inner logos, was the most sublime creature before we fell down into animal generation. Burn your books and whiten your brass, the masters of the Hermetic arts repeatedly remind us. All right? Burn your books. Don't need to read, you need to practice. And whiten your brass, that is, whiten the metal. Whiten your mercury. Become white, that is, pass through the black phase into the white phase. Purify yourself. Clean yourself. Eliminate the ego. The Blessed One, when passing through the torments of the brothers of the fraternity of the thistle, whitened the devil, and he turned it into its primeval shining state. Whosoever dies in themselves here and now frees the enchanted Prometheus, and the latter pays him in excess, because he is a colossus who has power over heaven, earth, and the infernos. Lucifer Prometheus, when totally integrated with all the parts of our being, converts us into something different, an exotic being, an archangel, or a mighty and divine power. When the holy women went into the sepulchre of the Savior of the world, they saw, instead of the man they knew, an angel dressed in a long white robe, and they were frightened. It is written, "And he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations. And he that shall rule them with an iron rod, and and he shall rule them with an iron rod, as the vessels of a potter shall they be broken into slivers, even as if I receive of my Father. Even as I receive of my Father, and I will give him the morning star, Venus, Lucifer. Okay, so look at these two interesting graphics here. I guess they can't both fit on the same shape, but here we've got two baby devils chained to the rock. Here we've got two baby angels stealing the fire. Henrik Kunrath writes in his Amphitheater of Eternal Wisdom book, finally, when the work has passed from an ashy to a white color, and then to yellow, you will see the philosophical stone, the sighted archangel, our king, the third Logos, who rises above his dominators, and leaves the glass sepulchre. He gets up from his rest and attends to our mundane scenery with his glorious body. That is to say, he is regenerated and more than perfect. In order to clarify, let us say that the term philosophical stone means in the sacred language the stone that bears the sign of the sun. In, I believe it is chapter 19 of Dogma of High Magic by Eliphas Levi from 1854. He calls it the Heliogabalus stone, black stone. Now this solar sign has the characteristics of the red color, whose hues can vary in intensity. An old alchemist said, "What we the philosophers pursue is not the union of a body and a metallic spirit, but rather the condensation, the conglomeration of this spirit into a coherent, hard, and refractory covering, which is able to cover it, impregnate all its parts, and provide it with efficient protection. This soul, spirit, or blended fire, properly mixed with the Venus Lucifer, concentrated and coagulated in the most pure, resistant, and perfect of all terrestrial matter, is what we call our stone. We can certify that any enterprise that is neither guided by this spirit nor founded in this matter will ever lead to the proposed goal." So that's the end of the quote related with the story of Quetzalcoatl and showing you the stages of alchemy that he passed through, and that if we understand this language of symbolism that we've been studying, that we looked at in Tarot and Kabbalah, in Hermetic Masonry, and that now we are seeing also in the runes, when we study this language of symbolism, we can understand any legend or religious symbol, religious story, we could say, or mythology, or whatever you want to call it, related to how to work, how to apply the teachings to ourselves, and teaching us or pointing out to us the path, the place to go, the steps to take, etc. That's the information that we wanted to talk with you about, to share with you today from chapter 9 of the Secret Doctrine of Anahuac. We invite you to share your questions and comments if you have any. And we also want to let you know that we're going to continue studying these shapes in the upcoming classes in order to continue and finish this Runology science that we're studying, which of course has this same beautiful alchemical symbolism, Kabbalistic symbolism, because really alchemy and Kabbalah, or two aspects of the same thing. They teach us about the same thing, the work we need to do. So in the upcoming class, we'll cover another lecture from the wonderful instructors over at Glorian, the Glorian website. Glorian Publishing, they make books and they have nice incense and posters, tarot cards, all that good stuff. If you don't know, glorian.org is their website. So we'll look at these 3 runes together, the Gebo rune, same ones that we looked at today, as well as talked about the R and the Kaum or Kaun rune and their interrelationship to this specific aspect of the work. So that's what we're going to do in the upcoming class. And we invite you to join us, which should be next week, same time. Got a comment. Thank you. It's a slow process to learn these things. Your help is much appreciated. For sure. It does take a little bit of time because it's like there's some kind of fog or block in the way, right? Some kind of thing. Blinders, we could say. So that's just it. It just takes time, like you said. May take even months or years for it to sink in and for it to click. And part of that process of learning is also getting used to absorbing this material, becoming steady at reading useful books, helpful books that to keep ourselves on the path and to acquire what's called a permanent center of gravity. That is that our center of gravity is the work on ourselves. This work to convert the black into the white and the white into the red. All right, well, that's it. We've got a shorter class today. Hopefully that's good. Give you a little more time to spend doing whatever you need to do, whether it's with your family, friends, or solo. And with that, we want to thank you for your attention. And we want to wish you the best in your esoteric work.